this is where you're going to want to be paying some attention around bill numbers, right? You're going to get some specific direction. So joining us today, going from your left to right, Jean Welch-Hill, Executive Director of the Washington State Catholic Conference, A.C. Churchill with Earth Ministry, Washington Interfaith Power and Light, and Kristen Ang with Faith Action Network. Please give them your attention. Do not pay any to me as I'm handing out handouts later.
I'm Kristen Ang. I'm the Policy Director for Faith Action Network. We're a statewide multi-faith partnership. We have over 172 faith communities and thousands who advocate for us for a just, compassionate, and sustainable world and through our communities. This legislative session, I think we all feel will be intense. The 2025 Washington State legislative session began on January 13th. And it marks the start of a critical 105-day session. It's called the long session. It's held in odd-numbered years, and it provides the time needed for lawmakers to develop and improve the state's biennial operating, capital, and transportation budgets while addressing significant policy issues. This year's session is particularly urgent, as legislatures must navigate a projected 10 to 12 billion budget shortfall over the next 4 years. And Washington is legally required to maintain a balanced budget during this 4 years, adding to the complexity of this session. Now, for the political landscape in this particular sessions, the Democrats strengthened their majority in both chambers, achieving a 30 to 19 advantage in the Senate and a 59 to 39 majority in the House. This is a 60% bonding supermajority that grants the ability to pass bonding bills without Republican support, and they are willing to use their majority this year, as that's what I've heard. The Senate welcomed 8 new Democratic members, with Senator Jamie Peterson from the 43rd Legislative District. He's a member of the LGBT community, assuming the role of Senate Majority Leader after serving in the Senate since 2013. As you know, your 3rd Legislative District, Senator Billig, retired. He used to be the Senate Majority Leader. And now you have Senator Marcus Riccelli, who used to be your rep. And now you have Rep. Natasha Hill, and you still have Rep. Tim Ormsby in the 3rd. In the House, the addition of 21 new members reflects a shift towards a younger, more progressive direction, driven by retirements, departures, and a significant Democratic victory in the 18th Legislative District. Some would say our legislature here in Washington is somewhat following what's happening in DC, in that both parties are becoming more divided on some of the issues. The November election results underscored strong public support for progressive revenue measures, with 64% of Washingtonians voting to uphold the capital gains tax legislation. And this was even in counties that voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. And that also was with regards to 2117, with regards to environmental measures. This was actually a bipartisan support. This outcome marked one of the most pro-tax statewide votes in recent history, signaling a mandate for lawmakers to consider for equitable revenue solutions in addressing the state's budget challenges. I must say that I always say that budget is all every year. It's not just this year, but most important this year because we are in a biennial budget, but also because there will be a tension between whether we do progressive revenue solutions like taxing the wealthy, increasing taxes there, or cuts. Now, what we're favoring for is do not cut social and public health services, because people are already struggling. And we've seen this situation before in the Great Recession, back when there was a housing crisis and they did a lot of cuts. Washington had more poverty, had more people struggling, and it took us a while to get out of that. I would say that also what's overshadowing a shadow over this whole particular session is the whole new administration in both Washington State and Washington, D.C. We've had 12 years of Governor Inslee, and now we have a new administration with Governor Bob Ferguson and whole new people in different cabinets. And we also have a new president and a new administration in DC, and we are feeling both, the tensions of both. Now, Governor Inslee's final State of the Address included his budget proposal. We actually testify on the proposal of Governor Inslee because he proposed a budget. And while Governor Ferguson, he proposed more of a roadmap, more of a suggestion. Now, in his 12-year tenure, Governor Inslee did talk about his achievements, whether it's legalizing same-sex marriage, abolishing the death penalty, assault weapons ban, climate action, and he wanted Washington to always be a beacon of progress and a light to the world, being evergreen and ever going forward, he said. And he urged lawmakers to avoid painful cuts, like that would happen in the Great Recession, emphasizing that budget reductions translate to concrete personal pain for Washingtonians. He called for progressive revenue measures, including a 1% wealth tax and business tax increases to ensure vital investments in behavioral health, housing, and climate initiatives continue. On the other hand, Governor Ferguson, he did not care for some of these progressive revenues, at least for now. He talked about a 6% overall reduction in state agency spending, aiming to save $4.4 billion. He wants to avoid new taxes and emphasize fostering collaboration to achieve fiscal responsibility. Now, I say that we are advocating for progressive revenue, and the Democrats are taking a look at that. But there will be cuts. Cuts will be made, but our budgets should still reflect our values. So this will be the fight this year, is all about the budget and what we fund and what we prioritize. Now, I would say the advocate's role, I said this week, we have an e-news. You can keep up with everything that's happening at the legislature if you sign up for FANS e-news, advocacy alerts, and we're going already crazy with our advocacy alerts when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the budget, when it comes to, I would say, even criminal justice reform. We are becoming more active this year because it calls for it. We are in, I would say, in some drastic times. And so advocates' role for this week and every week during the session is all about the budget. So we've been advocating Senate Ways and Means, the appropriations, to emphasize, to prevent harmful cuts to essential services. Fortunate for you, your three legislators that I mentioned, Senator Marcus Riccelli, is on the Money Committee, Fiscal Committee, and Senate Ways and Means. And the chair of Appropriations, which is the money in the House, is Representative Tim Ormsby. Representative Natasha Hill, your newest member, is on the House capital budget, and that's all about buildings, infrastructure. So you have yourselves some very powerful voices in Olympia that can shape where the funding goes, because where the funding goes reflects your values and reflects where we're going. Now, some of the, I would say, key legislative bills, I'm not going to go over so many. You can there's a QR code at our table over there at the gym to talk about our legislative agenda, and it runs the gamut, everything from economic justice, healthcare, environment, etc. And so, but I can't go through that. That's a lot of bills. So I'll go through a couple. One of the ones that is getting the headlines last year and this year is rent stabilization, because the number one priority for a lot of Washingtonians is housing. And that bill number is House Bill 1217 in the House and Senate Bill 5222 in the Senate. Now, this bill seeks to address housing instability by capping annual rent increases at 7%, requiring 180-day notices for increases over 3%, and limiting fees and deposits to 1 month's rent. The bill also includes exemptions for public housing, nonprofit housing, and newly constructed buildings less than 10 years old. This legislation reflects an effort to provide tenants with predictability and protection from sudden and unaffordable rent increases, ensuring housing stability for many Washingtonian residents in both mobile homes, condos, houses. I would say that everybody knows that we need more housing, but this is build more houses, but this is about keeping people in their homes, because there's the immediacy of the situation in which we simply can't build enough homes in enough time. So it's about keeping people in homes. And people have wondered, is there anyone else that does rent caps? Yes, the Canadian provinces do. And we talk to them about how do we increase the housing supply for the whole Pacific Northwest. And there is rent caps in British Columbia. The other one that I wanted to talk to you about, because I did say it's about budget, is universal free school meals. Now, that's Senate Bill 5352, that's Senator Marcus Riccelli's sponsored bill, and House Bill 1404 in the House. This is to ensure every student in Washington State has access to free school meals. And we've been working on this for many years, and it's been said that if you can provide free school meals, that's one way to really make a dent in ending hunger. It really should be a nationwide thing. And there are already 8 to 9 states that have already accomplished this. It will become even harder because our federal government recently has said they will want to gut and take away billions from the community eligibility program. And so we're already at a deficit because they will maybe reduce 400,000 students from having reduced and free school meals. So we have to make up for that in order to get there. I would say that this is supported by Governor Ferguson as well. It was in his list when he said he wanted, I think it's about $240 million, and it might be more because the federal government has suddenly decided they want to gut funding to kids. Anyway, I would say the second one is to fully fund senior nutrition programs, because one of the increasing rates of poverty are in seniors. We're experiencing so much more need in food security and hunger, and that's about $35.4 billion. And the other one is to extend funding for food banks and food pantries across our states, and that's investing $93 million or more in WSDA's food assistance programs. Now, like I said, we have so much more on our legislative agenda, whether it's regarding to advance immigration and refugee rights. As you know, we've been advocating for monies for integration, housing, legal aid, and that will continue this year. And there are so many more bills, as well as for criminal justice reform, specifically this week about giving the authority to the AG's office to be able to investigate as well as implement when there are systemic abuses and practices in police departments. And especially at this time, if there are certain police departments that go rogue and decide to flaunt the laws of Washington State, that this might be more important than ever. And there are new rules, even certain measures that our lawmakers are thinking about to ensure that Washington State laws and that our safety are intact during the next 4 years. And so this is what is happening in your state legislature, and I will hand it off to AC.
Hey y'all, how you doing? Did everybody get what they needed during break? A little bit, okay. It is good to be with you all this morning. My name is Reverend AC Churchill. My pronouns are they, them. I am the executive director at Earth Ministry, Washington Interfaith Power and Light. And Earth Ministry Washington IPL is a multi-faith environmental justice organization that works across Washington State. So we are communities, individuals who are connected to sacred traditions, who are connected to conscience and meaning and value. And we want to help both reduce harm that is being caused by environmental degradation, environmental catastrophes, and we want to work towards a vision of a just and sustainable world for everyone. So you'll see that in some of the bills that are on our legislative priorities, is that when we prioritize bills, there are a couple things that we look at. First is wanting to make sure that the work that we're doing is, again, trying to follow in those categories of, is it helping to reduce harm that is already being caused, especially in communities that are frontline communities or overburdened communities when it comes to environmental degradation. These are the communities that are often seen as sacrifice zones, or are the first ones to experience the effects of climate change. And so whether these are homeless communities or Black communities, indigenous communities, other communities of the global majority, we want to make sure that the legislative work that we do is helping to try to make change and impact in people's lives in the now, in the here and now. And the second piece of our legislative priorities that we want to work with is creating, not just working to stop bad things from happening. I mean, as people of faith and conscience, that's part of the beautiful thing that we bring to this work of advocacy is we not only can create space for loss and grief, because many of our sacred traditions teach us that, right? About lament and pain and not rushing past the hard things. But our sacred traditions also talk to us about hope for something else, that we have the possibilities of building something else in the world. And so you'll see in our legislative priorities, there's some ones that are hope-driven, that we have a vision that we're not only reducing bad things and stopping bad things, but that we're actually creating just and sustainable systems. So I appreciate all Kristen's insights, and I feel like I learned so much from everybody together. So one of the things that I want to make sure that you know about Earth Ministry is Washington IPL is that we partner with a lot of different environmental nonprofits and NGOs as part of coalitions that we're in, so that you'll see some of here the sponsoring organizations. On the bottom three are Environmental Priorities Coalition. That's a coalition that's made up of 27 organizations, across Washington State, and then that we are a part of. Front and center, the top one, is the sponsoring organization for CURB. We are not a part of Front and Centered because Front and Centered is a BIPOC-led environmental justice organization, and we are not BIPOC-led. We are, but we follow in the footsteps, and we follow in the path, and we follow in the guidance of Front and Centered as moving towards being an environmental organization that works primarily or focuses a lot of our work in addressing systemic injustices. So I'll go through a couple of these, and I have to say, Kristen or Jean, you may need to tap me. Y'all gave a preacher a mic, so apologize if I get going over. Let me know, and I'll rein it in. So the first one is CURB. This is the Cumulative Risk Burden Pollution Act. So this is the second year that CURB has been around. I'm wondering if there are any people who have been part of the legislative cycle before. Got a couple hands. So you may have seen CURB last year. It's back. The exciting thing about CURB is that it is working, and you can see all the details here. It is working to create an enforcement arm of the HEAL Act. So in 2021, at the same time as the Climate Commitment Act was passed the Healthy Environment for All Act. So HEAL Act was passed. And an amazing thing came out of HEAL, which was the health disparities map. For the first time, we were able to actually go in and see, based off zip codes and areas and different geographic areas, the different impacts of environmental degradation, of pollution, of toxins. And it's an amazing map. And Front and Centered has it on their website. We have it on ours, so you can go and check it out. The challenge with that map, though, is once we got the information, it was hard to know what to do with it because there was no enforcement lever of HEAL. So what do you do when you recognize that there's a zip code where that people have 25-year less life expectancy than the next zip code? CURB is, in a part, attempt to begin to create an enforcement lever and heel. So what it would do is it would require monitoring, and it would require the Department of Ecology to either mitigate permits. So if somebody came and said, we want to do this building project, it's going to create this much pollution. The Department of Ecology would say, you have to change your plan in these ways, or you have to mitigate for the harm in these ways, or the Department of Ecology could also deny the permit if it increased pollution. And with CURB, it prioritizes overburdened frontline communities first, because those are the ones who are experiencing environmental harms at a higher level than than other communities. So it's already had it's both in the House and in the Senate. It's already had its first public hearing in the House and its first reading in the Senate. Exciting that Kristen mentioned y'all's reps, is that for the House bill, Ormsby is one of the co-sponsors for CURB, and so he's one to tap into and to continue to encourage him to help his other reps move forward. And then in the Senate, it is Lovelett is the sponsoring senator. So I have more information on CURB. You can see there, but I want to keep going because I know we have more. The other bill that is actually has a number right now, because you'll see our bottom two don't, is the Recycling Reform Act. For those who, again, have been in the legislature before, this is take 3 for the RAP Act. That was the first one. REWRAP was last year. Now we're at the we're at the Recycling Reform Act. And the attempt here is to both reduce pollution, create free recycling for all Washingtonian residents. But I had a good question today about what does that count for churches and sacred communities. I don't know the answer to that, but I can figure it out. And to create a common list of what can actually be recycled, which is a huge barrier because different areas can recycle different things. And this also puts the responsibility back on producers of materials, that they have to begin to create materials that are more easily able to be recycled. So you see here, Environmental Priorities Coalition is the sponsor of that. Once again, Ormsby in the House and Hill, both of your reps, have signed on as co-sponsors for the House bill, and it has had its first public hearing. The Senate Bill 5284 is sponsored again by Lovelett and is scheduled for its first public hearing on the 28th of January. So what might be kind of confusing, depending on where you are at, I'm still learning about the legislature as well, is like, why do you have a House bill and a Senate bill? Why are there companion bills? And sometimes it's because one will go further and they want to introduce them in both chambers because they actually have to go through one chamber, then to the other. So they have to actually, even if it starts in the House, it has to go to the Senate, and then move on to the governor's desk. And so they are trying to increase the chances of it's actually getting to the governor's desk by having it both in the House and the Senate. So the hope here is that we advocate for all of them, and then one will tend to kind of move forward. But the last two are, one is a budget proviso, because you heard Kristen talk a lot about the budget, and recognizing that we are in a budget deficit, budget shortfall. So this is the Invest in Climate budget proviso is coming off of our really amazing, historic defeat of ballot initiative 2117, which statewide was a 62-38 margin. It was huge that we said, no, the Climate Commitment Fund, the Climate Commitment Act needs to stay. We need to begin to have these funds to move towards green energy and clean energy transitions. And the reason why this budget proviso is coming up is because we have a budget deficit. And there's a concern that all of this money that's coming in from the Climate Commitment Act could be reallocated to other projects. And so the attempt here is to say, no, the money that from the Climate Commitment Act, it doesn't need to go to existing projects or the general fund. It needs to go to new investments. It needs to go to the investments that are that have been committed to through the CCA. So that one will be coming out soon. And then the last one is Protect Advanced Clean Trucks, which is an effort to say we can't wait we can't delay anymore on reducing the amount of pollution that comes from transportation. We have to keep moving towards zero emissions, reduced emissions, trucking, and especially since transportation is such a huge part of our pollution in our state. It's over 40%. So there are lots of more. I think you can, if you want to learn more, we could talk about the details of them. I'd love to talk to you more. I've got a table in there, we got a table right next to each other, so you can come talk to Bree or myself or Kristen. And we'd love to be in partnership with you all and taking actions together, because the main way that we do this, especially through the legislature, is leaving comments, signing in pro, and also starting to get involved at a local level. That's one thing that we're going to be starting to do, is to try to get started at a local level and helping communities get connected to their city councils to then advocate from a city council standpoint to get the city council to advocate to the state legislature. So, thanks.
Thanks, AC. And it is just such a great pleasure and honor to be up here with these two. We also, Washington State Catholic Conference, we also partner with both of these folks for their expertise and their knowledge and all of the good work that they do. So I am Jean Welch Hill. I am the executive director of the Washington State Catholic Conference. We set our priorities. We follow too many bills, frankly, because our priorities are based in Catholic social teaching, and Catholic social teaching touches everything, including budgets, because budgets are moral documents. A budget shows what our priorities are. And that's our message to the legislature and to the governor this year is, your budget shows what your priorities are. If your priority is cutting services to people who are already vulnerable, that's a really poor public policy decision on your part. And that suggests a lack of a moral compass in many ways on what the state can do and where the state's priorities should be, because we should not be putting people who are already on the edge over that edge. So we want to keep our eyes always on the budget. There's a number of different provisos. There's a big fight among everybody. There's so many great ideas. We have over 1,000 bills already that we're parsing through. Great ideas. Most of those bills require money, and that money doesn't exist at this point. So we really need to be thinking about what are the policies that are going to have the most impact and that can get funded. So it's kind of a fun legislative year. So you are getting the sheets from us. The back just shows kind of our general priorities and how we set them to some extent, and the front are just a few of the many, many bills that we're looking at, but I wanted to share these with you. First and foremost, HB 1380, allowing objectively reasonable regulation of the utilization of public property. That sounds like probably the most boring bill you've ever heard of. But if you remember the case, if you paid attention, of Martin v. Boise, where Boise was saying we were going to put criminal charges on folks who are sleeping on sidewalks, who are sitting on sidewalks, who are standing on sidewalks, who are homeless, essentially. And the Ninth Circuit said, no, you can't do that if there's nowhere else for someone to go and they're going to die on your street if you don't let them have a tent and have some warmth. That case went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, no, it's okay to bring criminal charges against those folks because it's a generally applicable law. You're just applying it across the board. So 1380 says, if you are a city who imposes a no camping ordinance or a no sitting or a no loitering ordinance, that ordinance has to be objectively reasonable given the conditions. So you can't bring necessarily criminal penalties if somebody today, when it's 15 degrees outside, is sleeping on a city street in Spokane. So we want to just make sure, and it really does talk about keeping people, if someone is trying to stay warm and dry, it is not objectively reasonable to charge them with a crime if there is nowhere else for them to go. So that's a bill that Hill and Ormsby are both co-sponsors on. It has been heard in the House, and it goes to executive session on the 28th at 4 o'clock, which means you have until then to get a hold of Hill and Ormsby and say, hey, we hope you're going to vote this out of executive session, and then watch what it does on the House floor, because that will be the next step, and you'll be able to contact all of your representatives at that point and ask them to support the bill. SB 5082 creates housing assistance program for youth enrolled in extended foster care. These are kids in foster care who are on the verge of homeless or are homeless, and without some assistance, they will leave foster care and be homeless. This bill was run last year as well. It does have a fiscal note, and that is the challenge for this one. This is Claire Wilson, Senator Wilson. There's also a House version that's 1429. That version has not had a hearing yet. 5082 has had a hearing, and it goes to executive session on the 29th as well. So again, another opportunity. There are none of your senators are on that committee, so you can't do much with it, but you can always email committee members anyway and say, if you're interested, this is a priority. 1232, concerning private detention facilities. With the current federal administration, this bill is more important than ever, because we've seen their interest in having more private prisons brought online. So this bill requires that those private facilities meet at least some basic health and safety requirements. So they provide healthy meals for folks. They provide adequate heat and cooling for folks. They're taking care of those basic needs for people. So this one's actually critically important as well, and Hill and Ormsby, again, are co-sponsors on this bill. It has not been scheduled for a hearing yet, so we'll keep our eye out on that one. HB 1482 is also critically important, especially with the given administration, assuring equity and health coverage. This one's going to have a huge fiscal note, I will warn you right now. Right now, though, undocumented immigrants have no real access to health care coverage except for the Apple Health expansion. When Apple Health expansion opened for the undocumented, people rushed to sign up, and people got signed up, and there are still over 8,000 people on the waiting list for Apple Health expansion. So this bill, now that we can see the federal government is going to probably move towards taking even more people off of Medicaid and Medicare and other programs available for health care, undocumented immigrants don't qualify for federal care anyway, so the state program is all they have. And this bill would make sure that Apple Health expansion not only continues to exist, but also covers more of that population. We all benefit when people have health care coverage. And in Washington state, the least likely to have that coverage are the undocumented immigrants working in our agricultural industries and our construction industries. So they pay taxes in, they don't get the benefits out, and if we don't cover their health, we're all going to be faced with folks who are suffering from treatable diseases that become far more serious because they can't get just basic care. So we want to make sure that as those priorities are set for the budget, this, for us anyway, is one of those priorities, making sure that folks have access to that essential need of health care. And again, Ormsby and Hill are co-sponsors on that bill. And it has not had a public hearing yet. It actually just came out this past week, so it hasn't been scheduled for hearing yet. Couple more, and we are really focused right now on the undocumented in many ways just because of where we're at federally. SB 5023, providing labor market protections for domestic workers. This also has a House Bill 1561. If you want to hear compelling testimony, listen to the hearing in Senate Labor on this bill that happened this last week. And listen to stories of workers who are trafficked, they're labor trafficked, their employers take their documents away from them, and there is nothing they can do about it. Or their employers won't pay them. They say, well, you didn't do something right, so we're not giving you your wages this time. Or we're going to pay you far below minimum wage. Or we're not going to give you any sick leave, we're just going to fire you. So this bill would provide some of those protections that they would get if they were working in a business rather than for a local family. And it has been heard in Senate Labor. Executive session on that has not been scheduled yet, so we're waiting to see when that will get moved out of committee. And then finally, SB 5104, protecting employees from coercion in the workplace based on their immigration status. This also was heard in Senate Labor, and it is scheduled for an executive session on January 31st at 8 a.m. So you have some time. On this one, if you go to SB 5140, you'll see the opportunity to send an email to your legislator. You'll see that on all of these bills. You don't need to wait for hearings. You can go and look up the bill number, and you'll see an option to email your legislator about the bill. And I encourage you to do that at any time, just so that they know people are interested in these bills. With over 1,000 bills, most of those bills, no one is going to tell them that we care. So hearing from constituents that you do care about specific bills is critically important. And this one, again, just make sure that an employer can't say, hey, if you don't come to work on Sunday and not get overtime pay, we're going to inform ICE of your immigration status. It protects against those kinds of labor abuses against the undocumented. And finally, I don't have this one on the list, but I did want to just share it because of the group that we're with here. 5436 just came out as well, I think 2 days ago. Interfering with access to a place of religious worship. This bill isn't going to keep ICE from going into places of worship, but it is going to help protect our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Muslim brothers and sisters, from people who want to harass them for being who they are and practicing the faith they practice. And so this bill is one that we would want to make sure that we're all supporting to protect folks from that kind of harassment. Right now, the bill says if you come within 8 feet of someone for the purpose of harassing, you can be arrested. We kind of like to push that back a little bit so you don't have someone within almost arm's reach of you harassing you before you can do something about it. But ultimately, the bill is an important one for protecting that First Amendment right to practice your religion without being harassed as you walk into your place of worship. And with that, I think we may have time for some questions if people have them. 5436, Senate bill.
Want to make a pitch that if you want to go to Olympia in person, we do have Interfaith Advocacy Day on February 20th, where over 200 advocates come to the Capitol and advocate with their legislatures and also get to know one another. I think that's also important in these times, is to form relationships and community with each other. And like I said, you can also sign up for our weekly news alert, where we put links so that you can simply click and say if you agree or don't agree with a bill. We call it signing in pro. So you'll know what's happening in the week on certain bills. We have a bill tracker, and you can simply click, and within 10 seconds, you've already said yes or no on a bill. And we'll also have a lot of letter templates this year that will inundate your legislators and governor about the budget and about other issues.
Yes.
Yes, I still think so, because when I say about politics, there's a difference between people that are vehemently opposed versus slightly versus neutral versus this is not a priority. But there's going to be some things that you all agree on. Like, let's say you want to have the budget to provide something in your neighborhood, an organization, some sort of building. You'll likely agree on that. There's going to, for the most part, what gets the news is legislation that both sides are very partisan on. But however, most bills that pass are bipartisan. And so I think that's one thing that is lost to the public, is that a lot of the bills that are passed each year are bipartisan, and it just makes sense to both sides. And even if you have a difference between you and your legislature, it still is helpful to form a relationship with them. Develop that relationship, because you will have some things in common. And for the things that you don't, it's very helpful to make them understand why you feel the way you do and why these are your priorities. And maybe they won't be as vehemently opposed, but maybe not as they may not be the most helpful. But there is a difference between someone really fighting you versus someone who's like, okay, I'll just look at something else. And then for things that you both agree on the budget matter, helping an organization, putting money towards something, you will have an ally.
I think I'll add on to that is just to say, our policymakers and legislators often only know what they hear from us. And so if we're not talking to them, if we're not, in some ways it feels like, if you're looking at, the 9th district or the 4th district or the other districts that don't have leaders who feel like are aligned with you, it might feel like, well, what's even the point? Or should I even reach out? But there is a point for them to know that this is what is important to you as part of their constituency. I think one of the other things that I would kind of plug is this is why it's really important that we know our stories and why these things matter to us. Because it can be easy when you're talking to a legislator to bring data in, or you could take in any of the fact sheets that any of our orgs have, and I can guarantee you that most policymakers also have fact sheets as to why they aren't supporting that particular piece of legislation. What's harder to counter and what is harder to dismiss is your story and the impacts of why things matter to you, of why it matters to you that the children have in your neighborhood and people have access to free lunch. Why does it matter that we have clean water and clean air? Because you're worried about your kids, or you're worried about your own future, or you see your grandchildren struggling with asthma, or it matters. And so, a quick plug, which is later today, Bree and I will be doing a faithful advocacy training, which will have a piece about sharing your story. I'll also be doing a sharing your story, a little bit more in-depth workshop on like crafting your own story, in particular as it relates to the GTN pipeline expansion that's happened in this area, and how we can create stories around public narratives around fighting back that says, nobody in this area is concerned about fossil fuel expansion, which is not true. But sharing why things matter to you and understanding your own reason really can help get to the heart of the matter and move beyond the data and the facts that can be argued from either side, when your own story and your own experience is powerful and makes change.
Yeah, there we go. I'll add. The great Scott Cooper once told me, you can see all the votes you need in Olympia from the Space Needle. Your legislators are fighting an uphill battle, and they need your support. And they may forget that sometimes, and so we have to remind them of that. But if it is something that is specifically going to impact people in your community heavily, they need to know that they've got voters on their side, so that they can also go to their colleagues and say, look, I've heard from how many people about the impact this is going to have in Eastern Washington. You may all here at the legislature forget Eastern Washington is out there, but it is. And these are the folks who are going to be impacted by what you're trying to do here. So, and that's a nonpartisan experience. That is something that they're definitely looking for supporters, and they may not know how an issue is going to impact until you help them understand how that's going to impact. So never give up on, I come from Utah, so I'm coming from bright, bright red, where I would never felt represented, and it was always an uphill battle. And we just kept battling, because you have to build those relationships. And that is the key to politics, is having relationships with your legislators.
So we are coming to the end of our time here. I really want to thank the attendee who very bravely shared that she's from the 4th. Thoughts and prayers. With a reminder, too, that we have folks here, not everybody's from the 3rd, right? So I know we have folks here from the 9th. Do we have anybody from the 6th and the 7th? And we know, so, right. So I want to especially invite you to connect with our presenters here if you are from any of those districts, because it's then possible that your representatives and senators are in a key position on some of the legislation that they've mentioned, and you can then exercise a particular important role in communicating with your legislators on some of those issues, right? Does that make some sense? Okay. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause, please, to our panel.